Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome here to Flat Out Racing Network's coverage of Race 4, Season 4 of the Dark Horse Racing Series with the DW12 cars. We are getting set to go racing under the lights here tonight in the Windy City at the Chicagoland Speedway. Qualifying currently underway as we speak. I'm Seth Cole alongside of Scott Rankin. And Scott, in the first 4 races, they've been hit with a 2-mile speedway / super speedway, road course week 2, the Magic Mile last week at New Hampshire, and now they're hit with a 1.5 miles here tonight. So 4 entire different configurations for them in the first 4 races of the schedule.
That's exactly how you want to start off a league. You want to get them into the flow of things. Make sure that their driving juices are flowing. You've hit them with 4 different tracks. After tonight, we can sit down. We got a lot of data to work with. We can go, all right, we can look at Robert Mileska III. We can tell that he was phenomenal on fuel at Michigan. He was nearly there at Road America until he made a mistake coming out of some of the slow corners, got on the gas too aggressively. He had to fight his way through traffic last week. He came away with the win, albeit controversially. Man, it's been one hell of a season so far, and we're only in round number 4. What are we expecting from tonight? I reckon we're going to get a lot more chaos again.
We can hear Matt Wagner in the 11. We saw Jimmy Drynan just moments ago. A lot of talking points coming in tonight. Maybe the big one that I've been hearing from drivers up and down the grid here this evening is the fact that here tonight, it's going to be a lot about throttle control because your car gets super tight when you're running in somebody else's draft. So we could see a lot of 1v1 battles here this evening as opposed to the pack racing we saw back in the season opener, the 2-mile track.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's different options. Chicagoland's phenomenal at that. It does create really, really good racing. Expect a lot of that pushing, though. That aero problems is going to be a massive, massive issue. So, look, I mean, the drivers are going to have to deal with it. They'll do the best that they possibly can, and they'll move on with it. I mean, it's the same for everyone. Fixed setups in this series means that everyone's out there in the same setup is going to be experiencing the same things. All except for that leader, of course. He's going to have things a little bit more his own way. But hey, look, it's IndyCar. It creates close racing. It creates exciting racing. The racing so far has been phenomenal. A lot of respect shown between all the drivers as well. Even the drivers that get caught when they should be at the front of the pack and they have to fight their way through, they're doing it very, very respectfully. And something the Dark Horse has shown me is that these guys are actually really good race car drivers, and they're very aware, switched on. They're not sending it. They're not being incredibly aggressive. They're being the right amount. They're doing everything in moderation, the right bits and pieces that you really want from it.
Looking at Henry Bennett, our winner from a couple of weeks ago at Road America. Moments before, we saw Nick DeGroot. Now, DeGroot's actually got some momentum coming into tonight's event. Granted, he doesn't have a win here this season, but just 2 days ago, he ended up picking up the victory in that Indianapolis 500 special event that Dark Horse had. So, obviously, if you're looking at someone that's got some good mojo this week, you wouldn't have to look far to the number 89, who currently sits 4th on the board. Right now, it's Robert Mileska, who is on the top, looking for his 2nd pole on the season. Of course, the only multi-time winner so far this year. And, oh yeah, by the way, his previous pole back at Michigan, when he sat in the pole, he went on to win that race. So we could end up seeing him try to go coast to coast for the 2nd time this season.
Yeah, but you got to remember that race back at Michigan, that wasn't all his own way. He literally had to sit back there and feel safe, and that's how he ended up winning the race, because he used his head. He was a little bit better at it than all of his competition around him. So, look, I mean, options, different opinions. What's everyone going to be able to run? Is he going to be able to run away at the top again? You mentioned it. Wagner's been right there. Henry Bennett's been there. Henry's been troubling him quite a lot. Bronson Stafford, the rookie to the league, has been putting a lot of pressure on these guys as well.
Yeah, even with Robert Mileska having such a good start to his year, only 6 points, make that 5 points actually, over Bronson Stafford, as you mentioned, and only 11 points over Henry Bennett. Rick Ravon, also up there in the top of the standings, 19 points back in fourth. So it is still anybody's chance to even here tonight at Chicagoland to pick up the points lead into next week. It's kind of interesting, too, because talked about last week at New Hampshire how it was the first time that the drivers in the Dark Horse Racing Series had taken to that racetrack. Well, how about back-to-back weeks, because Chicagoland is making its first appearance on the IndyCar schedule.
Yeah, but Chicagoland's also one of those tracks that does show up from time to time, so these drivers should be aware of it. So, look, I mean, got to be happy with it. I'm a big fan of Chicagoland, in terms of in terms of what it brings to the schedule. It's a tight track. It's difficult. It's not easy to drive this track quickly in the train. Out in front with Robert Maleska, who's managed to snap himself another pole by, get this, 1/1000th of a second. He's managed to take it away once again. He's going to have the easiest job because he's going to be able to get that jump. Then everyone else behind him is going to shuffle in and be in that aero wake. So look, if I'm in Maleska's shoes tonight, maybe I throw that fuel window a little bit out there and I force the guys behind me to follow me in that wake for a little bit. Just see what they can really do. Once they get by me, maybe I do settle back into that fuel saving strategy. Maybe I'm trying to save as much as they possibly can. But hey, look, who knows?
Great qualifying effort out of Charles Teed as well, as he sits on the front row with Robert Maleska III. Taking a look here at our starting lineup for this evening's event, and we've been told that the number for these drivers for the most part is about 40 laps that they can stretch it on fuel. You take that, put that into a 120 lap race, so there's at least 2 pit stops that these drivers are looking at to make if we manage to run this entirety under green flag conditions. And some of these drivers might stretch it a couple of laps, some of them might pit a little bit earlier by a couple of laps over that window, so we certainly could see some pit strategy come into play in tonight's event. That was a look at your LMCgear.com starting lineup. LMCgear.com is a one-stop shop for all your motorcycle camping and backpacking needs, specializing in camping gear that is ultra lightweight and compact, making it perfect for carrying on your motorcycle or in a backpack. They also carry all the motorcycle accessories you need to get your gear safely down the road. Check out lightweightmotorcyclecampinggear.com today. Base car is going to be leading these cars off the grid momentarily. And how aggressive do we see these guys in the start of this race? Because obviously everybody had to have experienced that aero tightness when they have someone pull right up in front of them. Last thing you want to do, since even though you have a faster pair at your disposal, is have to use that faster pair with a torn up race car only a few laps into this event.
Yeah, look, I mean, you're going to go in a couple different directions. There's going to be drivers who want to be aggressive, who want to get to the front in the front. Remember what I said as well. If you can get your car out in front, you're not going to be suffering from the effects of the aero wake. So there are going to be a couple guys who are looking to be aggressive and put themselves ahead of everyone else just so they don't have to deal with that. Alternatively, I talk about this every week. It's play yourself into the game. Make sure that you're available to win the race. It's the most important. You don't have to lead a single lap of the race to win, except for that last lap. That's the only one that counts. I was having this conversation with another racer last night. It could be drivers saving tires, saving fuel, and that's their target. They're basically just going, I gotta get myself to this last pit stop with a clean car, be in the window, be attached to the front group, and then I'm gravy. Everything before that is just about setting yourself up. When you're working out pit stops and those sorts of things in these cars, in these sorts of situations, you actually start at the end of the race, and you work your way backwards. So it's 120, all right, 40 back's 80, 40 back from that's 40. So you're breaking the race down into 3 segments based upon the end of the race backwards. And then it's about segmenting the race, notifying yourself in your head, making sure you make a conscious decision to focus on those stages of the race as they come and lift the ante each time.
Down the backstretch they go as we are underway here at Chicagoland. Maleska III out in front. That's Nick DeGroot in the yellow and black machine trying to go for second place on Charles Teed. Jimmy Drynan in the Menards machine up on the top side, trying to make it 3 wide there going into the corner. Now, we ended up noticing back during the qualifying, drivers going down onto the apron on the front straightaway. That is allowed during qualifying conditions, but under race conditions, that is considered out of bounds. These drivers must keep their machines on the right side of the white line at all times, or else there would be a penalty incoming.
It's interesting. I mean, normally when you think of Chicagoland, that area on the front stretch is considered in play. It is for stock cars. They need that extra little bit of space to wiggle room, but Indy cars don't need that, and that's the decision that race control and admins have made. And look, it's the same for everyone, and that's what whenever you're making decisions based upon what sections of the racetrack that you want to be available, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you can choose if you want to cut turns 5, 6, 7 on a road course, you know, and you're happy with that, and everyone cuts them, and it's easy to manage and manipulate. Go right ahead. You know, it has to be even. It has to be consistent for everyone, and then it's down to the racers to actually sit down and work out the best way to manipulate those circumstances for themselves.
DeGroot has moved to the point. Teed will follow in second. Maleska has dropped 2 spots since the start. Back into the 3rd position with Jimmy Drinan and Bronson Stafford. Currently completing the top 5. Ooh, Drinan. I don't know if he got the apron or if he just really got tight, but that thing went straight towards the wall off of turn 2. Bronson Stafford looking to take advantage. And it's interesting because we were doing an event a couple of nights ago. I think it was actually the Indy 500, Special Event Indy 500. Myself and Anthony McCurry were talking about this upcoming race at Chicagoland. And if you look at the backstretch, it's not a straightaway because what it really is it's a curved backstretch. So, and in essence, Chicagoland's really one of the true ovals out there of the 1.5 mile configuration.
Yeah, look, if you want to get technical, I mean, you know, you can start going, well, none of this is a oval, this is just 2 corners, you know, this is basically a rounded oblong, etc., etc. It's technical. Let's leave it nice and simple. They're all ovals in the same stretch. They've got 2 corners, you know, a little bit of a D oval on some of them. Yeah, it all happens, you know. But, yeah, look, I mean, it's different, and one of the best things about racing is that everywhere you go, it's not like, say, soccer, it's not like football, whereby you go to different pitches, and ultimately the pitch is the same. You know, the field of play is very, very similar. Oh, yeah, the markings might be slightly different. Some of the colors are used. Racing, every time you go somewhere different, the course is different. How you attack the turns, the banking, the road surface, the way that you're driving is always going to be different. The airflow, the air direction are actually really crucial factors. iRacing does model that, by the way. That is important to these cars. It does unsettle them in specific manners if the airflow is coming from a different direction. So, you know, when you say, yeah, you know, you kind of can't call an oval, is there any, you can call it a true oval because there's some banking. But then again, can you really say that it's an oval? Because nothing's a true oval. It's a D. It's not really an oval, it's a D. But then again, it's a D, a subclass of oval. Yeah, it's racing, it's semantics, man. Let's move on.
Well, we're going to look at this battle for second. Maleska getting around Charles Teed, and Bronson Stafford stuck his wing in there on driver's right, trying to get to the top side of Teed for the 3rd position. I got to wonder, though, with the fact that, you know, you end up having this somewhat curved backstretch. Obviously, as we saw on board there moments ago with Dylan Moskowitz, you are continuously turning left. How does that affect these drivers here in these Indy cars in terms of side-by-side battles down the backstretch?
Yeah, there's no real issue because, I mean, you as a driver, you're aware of it. There's markings around the track to help you maintain the lane and the groove that you're in. That's how the drivers do it. It's not just as simple as, you know, the drivers know where they need to be. No, there's markings, there's bits and pieces that really help them and allow them to drive in specific ways. So, yeah, look, I mean, it's difficult, it's different, but until you actually get out there and experience it. Yeah, we're turning left the whole time. Yeah, it's something you've got to be aware of as a driver. You know, you've probably got to allow that little bit of extra space. But that's just something. It's a quirk to the racetrack. It's a slight adjustment. A foot at the most is what you're going to be making the adjustment.
And a bit of a slow start to the season for Matt Wagner, who was a 2-time winner last year, winning both the season opener and the season finale of the Indy 500. Right now, mired back here in the 15th position, trying to take a position away from Jim Herrick in the 40. That's Jeff Hysong there in the red and black machine, looking on the inside of him as well. But Matt Wagner coming into this race 10th in the point standing, struggled last week at New Hampshire, and you kind of are getting the feeling of when are the wheels finally going to start turning for this team, because we know he can be competitive week after week. He just has kind of not been able to get out of the blocks in the first 3 races.
Which is really interesting for Matt Wagner, because he's definitely had shows. I think he's been unlucky, to be perfectly honest. He's put himself in some aggressive positions, and then the issue that Matt's had is that he's basically said, I'm going to focus on getting towards the back half of the race. But then he's put himself in really, really bad positions whereby he's had to push harder than he would have liked. And that has caused an error, whether that be an error that he's made or an error another driver's made as he's attempting to overtake them. And that's just unlucky. And a lot of the times he's been in similar sorts of positions whereby, you know, there's an accident and it happens to be ahead of him because he's not as high up. He definitely has the pace. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he won the Indy 500 not over the weekend, but the previous one, but in between the most recent season and our current season. And he's definitely got the pace. He's definitely got the ability. So I don't know. This is a really poor show of form, which is uncharacteristic for Matt Wagner.
Yeah, it definitely is. Matt Wagner, very good at the road courses last season, was constantly up there inside the podium, but didn't do exactly what we were thinking back at Road America, and then as mentioned, did not have a good run last week at New Hampshire either, albeit a lot of that was in part to the timing of cautions coming out and trapping him off the lead lap after he had made a green flag pit stop. So kind of alluding to what you were saying, just been kind of unlucky here in the first 3 races. We'll see if he can turn his luck around here tonight as we're looking at 11th place battle. Covey Moore in the 15 alongside of Mike Tellier in the 97. And obviously, we're not going to talk a whole lot about this, but we do have to shed a little bit of light on what happened last week, because bear in mind, we talked about the fact that New Hampshire made its debut on the schedule, and last week's race, while it was exciting, it was not without controversy. A little bit of a war of words afterwards between the eventual winner, Robert Maleska III, and Jim Brooks after the two made contact on that final lap. Now, I'm not expecting any fallout from that, as they obviously have had a week to be able to think about it, but it is something we do have to keep an eye on. Right now, I think Jim Brooks is back in the fuel-saving strategy, kind of what he did last week as well at New Hampshire. Right now, back in the 17th position. Maleska up here in 2nd place, so they're nowhere near each other, but it is something we do have to keep an eye on just based off of previous history from last week.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, anytime you have a running together with a driver, you're going to be aware that's an issue that you're going to have to manage the following week. And look, Jim felt hard done by. Jim was very upset. You know, he had a great opportunity, and I think a lot of the fan vote would have been definitely going towards him to take it away from Robert Maleska. And ultimately, both drivers said that they wanted to race for it. That's what you want to hear from those guys as well. You know, you want to hear the guys saying, hey, I wanted to go out there, and if he beat me on speed, all power to him. And that's exactly what both drivers were trying to do. But when you've got drivers that are pushing the limits in the method that they were pushing it, yeah, look, I mean, it's going to happen. It was a phenomenal race last week. You can't take anything away from it. It didn't end in the best light, but it was just such a good race. So close, so difficult. Robert Maleska did a phenomenal job driving back through the field on a track that was so difficult to overtake on. So you can't take that away from him. And, you know, at the end of the night, he should have been happy with a 2nd place finish. It wasn't to be. He took it away from Jim, and, you know, Jim didn't get the finish that he necessarily deserved as well. Look, it's racing at the end of the day. If you can't take those knocks, if you can't accept those intra-car battles and accept them for what they are, then you shouldn't be out on the racetrack, to be perfectly frank with you. That's racing. So he's got to accept it. He's got to deal with it in whatever way he's going to deal with it and move on.
It's definitely a bitter pill to swallow, but I'm 100% with you. You know, as soon as you take that green flag, you're basically taking that green, starting that race with the knowledge there's only going to be one winner at the end of the night. It may be you. More than likely, it's not going to be you. I mean, you're opening yourself up to that risk, and that's what these drivers do every single week. Things have gotten spread out here at the front of the field. DeGroot's got little less than a second back to Robert Maleska. Then about 1.2 seconds back to Bronson Stafford in 3rd. He's got over half a second back to Charles Teed. Then another half second back to Henry Bennett. We're not really seeing a lot of side-by-side racing until we get outside of the top 10. So for the most part, all these guys up here inside of the top 10 positions, they're all just kind of running their own races here. Some of them might be conserving. Some of them might be testing the waters in certain grooves for later on in the race. A little bit of experimentation time for those guys.
Yeah, look, I mean, we talked about in the pre-show, you know, that there was going to be options for a lot of these drivers to run in different formats, and a lot of these drivers to go for fuel saving, and then we're going to create a lot of these little packs worth of racing. That hasn't quite happened, but it has at the same time. If you actually have a look at Nick DeGroot and Robert Maleska, in the early phases of the race, Maleska drifted back. When you're on the pole and you get a great launch, what happens is you can give yourself a too good launch. So he's gotten too far out there, the arrows pulled him back. because the other drivers have been in his draft and got a lot more momentum going on. He gets passed a couple times, there's nothing he can really do. From there, he sort of settled in a little bit. Nick DeGroot took the 4. From there, what's happened is the 2 guys that were immediately behind Nick DeGroot, they started fighting. That allowed Nick to run away, and then since then, it's been Robert Maleska had to pick his way past those 2 guys, and then try and mount an attack, and he hasn't been able to get back there yet. So what's happened is effectively Nick DeGroot has made the most of his competition fighting themselves and tripping over themselves.
Now, we didn't see it, but I have been noticing a number of drivers really getting tight, pushing up off of turn 2, particularly towards that outside wall. I believe a couple of laps ago, Jim Herrick may have done that. He has since brought his car to pit road, and he's actually taken on his faster pair already. So, tough break there out of the gates for Jim Herrick in that 40 machine. Right now, 1 lap down in the 22nd position.
Yeah, unlucky for Jim. I mean, you know, potential for another good finish. He was running really well again last week. That fuel stop race that New Hampshire created for us was definitely an interesting race, and Jim Herrick was one of the guys that was benefiting from it. Tough break. Sometimes you just got to accept him.
There's a couple of guys, obviously, up here that we saw last season. We saw even the season before at the end of Season 2 when FRN came on to start the broadcasting for this series. But some new faces have popped up here full-time for this season. We've already sung the praises of Bronson Stafford, how consistent he's been in the first 3 races. Second in the points, only 5 points behind Robert Maleska III. And right now, trying to track down the aforementioned Maleska for the 2nd spot. Right now, Bronson holding down 3rd place. Another guy back there, how about Polo Hernandez? Had that 2nd place finish back at Road America, followed it up with another good run last week at New Hampshire, and right now, 6th on the racetrack, 7th in the point standings coming to this one. So there's some new faces that are starting to get up here, and that's the beautiful thing about a new season, because there's always those drivers that you didn't see in the past couple of seasons that start mixing it up with the early favorites.
Yeah, and I'm actually very, very impressed by what Polo Hernandez has done so far this season. You mentioned his road course start. That was phenomenal. Sorry, excuse me. Look, I need to get more sleep. Polo Hernandez has done a phenomenal job at the road course, but then if you have a look last week at New Hampshire, I wasn't overly impressed with him at Michigan. He didn't have a great race at Michigan. He never really played himself into things there. But last week at New Hampshire, he was aggressive. He was making moves throughout the field, and he had his car up there in a really good spot a couple times right throughout the race before Field's strategy obviously changed things up once again. So Hernandez has probably put a lot of practice in, and he's actually really starting to show his abilities. 6th place? I don't know. I think he can get into the top 5 towards the back end of this season.
Right now, he has picked up the most spots since the drop of the green flag. Started 11th, up 5 to 6th. Driver that behind him has picked up the most spots, 4 spots to the good. That's Rick Ravon, and that's a little bit surprising because Rick Ravon was a former pole sitter last week at New Hampshire. He's been very good this season so far. Finds himself 4th in the overall standings, 19 points back, but he qualified back in the 13th position and only made his way into the top 10 about 10-15 laps ago. So not the usual speed we're used to seeing out of Rick Ravon. You kind of wonder if maybe they've missed something here early on, or if maybe they are playing an entirely different strategy than what we've seen them do in the first 3 races.
Yeah, ultimately, something to consider as well within Dark Horse is that the qualifying setup is different to the race setup. So, and the only time they really get to utilize that is in their own private practice sessions or when qualifying actually comes around. So there could be a case that a fair few of these drivers, Matt Wagner could actually be included in this, didn't have the practice that they needed on the qualifying setup to be able to go out there and really hammer. As far as I'm aware, the qualifying setup only differs in terms of fuel level. Well, look, I mean, you know, it could be more to that, but the fuel level definitely changes the balance of the car. So some of these guys that didn't get their qualifying runs as best as they could be, they're starting to recover. They're starting to really push their races forward, as we know that they're really capable of. But, you know, it's too little too late. When you start that far back, the amount of effort that you've really got to do. So these guys will be targeting getting to those final 40 laps and then pushing on from there. So for now, they're just sort of picking guys off as they can, pull somebody else back to you, pull somebody else back to you, grab them. It's a 10 sort of lap, playing the race in 10 sort of lap intervals at that pace.
Riding on board here with our race leader, Nick DeGroot. You see very little hand motion, easing the car carefully into the corners, and then not a whole lot of counter steer coming off of either turn 2 or turn 4. I want to get your take on something here that we can see on the steering wheel panel. that I ended up hearing during practice. You'll notice up in the top middle, the number 5, that is the gear he is in, 5th gear. Believe it or not, they were saying that you actually use up more fuel in 6th gear here this evening than you do in 5th. That's why pretty much every driver in the field is keeping their car in 5th gear. That shocked me because normally, with my limited experience in these Indy cars, 6th gear is kind of considered your 4th gear in a stock car, your draft gear, and that is usually the gear you go in to save the fuel. But that's not the case here tonight.
I would, okay, so draft gear, yeah, talking from stock car terminology, that's a really bad crossover, because stock cars, Indy cars, are so different. Draft gear, yeah, but stock cars tend to run in their 4th gear no matter really where they are. They just want to be in 4th gear because that's where they sit. That's an interesting one. I haven't heard that. That's new to me, that 6th gear would be wanting more fuel. And the guy that I'd be out in the clear air, yeah, I can understand it. So the reason that you would be in 6th gear and burning more fuel is because you're in full throttle for a lot more of the lap, because you've really got to exert that. So when you get into 6th gear, we experience it in terms of our road cars, the gear ratio is a little bit slower, so your torque is less, your ability to accelerate the car is less. So that means you've got to spend a lot more time at full throttle to get to the same sort of speeds, which means that that your lap pace is a little bit different, you know, a little bit slower and those sorts of things. I just heard Nick DeGroot just say on the mic that he's going to be pitting the next time by, too.
These drivers just completed their 41st lap. DeGroot, oh, slides the tires, but I think he did at least make it between the cones and onto that commitment line. That's going to be something these drivers going to have to deal with, too, because I was hearing also in practice that this track's kind of deceptive in how aggressive you can take it onto pit road. You got to back it down a lot more than you would originally expect to make sure that you're able to get onto pit road entry and be able to get between those commitment cones. Hard on the brakes there for Maleska. A lot of smoke off of that left rear.
Yeah, so remember that there was a lot of discussion at the official Indy 500 this year that the way, and, you know, look at the way that those drivers were using their brakes. What's happening is the brakes need to be offset, the brake pads need to be offset from the brake discs. And the reason that you want to offset those pads from the disc is because you don't want those brakes, when the car's vibrating around the racetrack, to shuffle in and start to make contact with the disc. You lose a lot of time, a lot of speed, a lot of momentum. It's not good in terms of your overall lap pace. So the margin for those pedals was increased. There was a bigger gap between the pads and the disc. And what that means is for the guys to actually get their cars to slow down, they have to slam on the brakes, because first of all, they've got to make sure the the pads move in and make contact with the disc, and then you've got to apply pressure between those pads and the disc to get the car to stop. That's why we saw so many accidents in pit lane entry in the IR18, I think it is, within official IndyCar at Indianapolis. These guys here, not as much of an issue. These are regular setup, but it's still difficult to come from such a high speed from a banking where you've got grip. You can throw the car in to all of a sudden bring the car to a stop.
So Jeremy Drinan pit from the lead. Matt Wagner inherits the top spot, and now he'll duck onto pit road. Looks like it will cycle back around to Nick DeGroot, and he actually extended his gap between himself and Robert Maleska III. It was about 9/10 of a second when the two hit pit lane. It is now opened up to almost a second and a half between those two drivers, and it looks like everyone that ducked onto pit road, everybody got it down to pit road speed. No penalties handed out here in this first round of green flag pit stops.
Yeah, that's a really phenomenal stop by a lot of these guys as well. You'll see Matt Wagner will rejoin the racing surface in a little bit, and hopefully bring that car back up to speed. So the gap between our guys here at the front is 1.4, 1.5 seconds. That is so close to Robert Maleska losing the draft from Nick DeGroot, and then it's onto your own race. But alternatively, Nick DeGroot, for the first time in a long while, he's catching lap traffic. He's going to be in the arrow of these guys. They're punching that hole, they're disturbing the area in front of him, so he's going to have the effects of that draft manipulation in a very near future. Alternatively, though, he's going to be faster in a straight line, so we're actually going to see the true pace and the difference between Maleska III and Nick DeGroot for the first time in a couple moments here.
Yeah, those two drivers up ahead are Gale Brooks and Nicholas Winook. Both of those drivers on the tail end of the lead lap, but albeit maybe a half a straightaway ahead of the race leader and in danger of going a lap down here as we're closing in on 50 laps into this event. Now, obviously, with these pit stops cycling around, this has put Jim Herrick back on the lead lap, but he is way off sequence from everybody else. He's actually about maybe 10, 15 laps away from him. He's going to have to come back down pit road again. And while all of these drivers are going to only probably have to make one more stop before the conclusion of this race, Herrick looks like he might have to make two.
Yeah, that's disappointing, obviously, for his night. You know, it's going to be a difficult time. Actually, keeping my eyes on Matt Wagner, actually, whilst we're looking at Jim Herrick, Matt Wagner's just grabbed 2 spots for position as well, so he's all of a sudden turned the wicker up a little bit. I think in that first stage, we were talking about how he was mired way back in terms of the pack. I think it was fuel saving. I think he got caught out and his qualifying wasn't great, and then he went, you know what? I can't make up a lot from here. I'm going to use my head here and save as much fuel as I possibly can.
See if that's going to help him, as right now, just about everybody came down pit road between laps 41 to 44, so they're over that 40-lap mark, which I don't know if it seems like there wouldn't be any question that these guys would be able to make it the rest of the way on just one more pit stop, but then again, with the field getting as spread out as it is too, don't know if necessarily draft would come into play with that 40-lap target we were given or not. Just to update as well, another driver did use a faster pair under that cycle of green flag pit stops, and that was Gale Brooks in the 71 machine. So that would account for why Gale lost so much time on pit road. And now it's Gale Brooks and Jim Herrick, the only 2 drivers that have used their faster pairs at this point in time. That was Nicholas Winook that went a lap down to Nick DeGroot, but while DeGroot was trying to get around the 33, Maleska has cut down half of the lead DeGroot had about 5 laps ago.
Yeah, but that could open itself back up again in terms of traffic here in a few moments, because, you know, Maleska is now going to be in that draft. You can already see it, you know, that gap's opened up just a touch. It'll shrink again a little bit here, and then it'll open up again, then it'll shrink and it'll open up again between the straights, because DeGroot's no longer got that aero wake a little bit on his wing. This pack here, this is phenomenal. Like, just how tight and close the racing is in this middle of the field. I'm actually just continuing to monitor Matt Wagner's progress. He's making a lot of time up. He's actually surging towards Jeff Heisung at this point in time. Who's that on pit road?
That was Jim Brooks, unscheduled stop for the 51. I'm going to assume he might have gotten the outside wall at some point in the last couple of laps, because he just came down and he just took his faster pair.
Take a quick look at the front end of his car over the next couple laps and just double check.
Got some good battling back here, just inside of the top 5. Henry Bennett in the 07. That's Charles Teed, the neon yellow, orange, and blue machine. And just ahead, Polo Hernandez. That's 4th, 5th, and 6th. Rick Ravon just behind there as well in the 2. So that's 4th through 7th, all with under a blanket pretty much, about maybe 0.8 of a second separating those 4. And not too far back, you've got the yellow number 4 of Dylan Moskowitz holding down 8th place.
Yeah, so this battle pack's really starting to sort of eke itself out. These guys will be sort of stuck together for an extended period of time here. It's really interesting to see the gap between Nick DeGroot and Robert Maleska is only about a second at this point in time. Then it's 3 seconds back to Bronson Stafford, and then you've got another 3 seconds back to Polo Hernandez in this group right here. So a lot that these drivers were talking about and the packs breaking up into these micro battles is definitely coming true, but whether or not they can keep it this way, well, we're about to find out.
We might actually, I obviously don't want to have the commentator's curse take place here, but if they continue to run the way that they are right now, we could be en route for our 3rd caution-free race in the first 4 races of the season. We were caution-free at Michigan. Obviously, we were caution-free at Road America, with it being only local yellow flags.
We were localized caution. We weren't localized caution-free.
We weren't localized caution, but full course yellow-free. And then obviously we did have a number of cautions last week in New Hampshire, but you know, if we continue under the green flag here tonight, that's incredible. 3 races in the first 4 races of the schedule without the yellow flag waving.
And look at what a big part that actually played into things in terms of the racing at Michigan as well.
Oh, yeah,
in terms of the fuel race, you know, it actually opened up the strategy here tonight. The strategy itself isn't actually an option, which is disappointing. But look, I mean, you're going to have those races. The better part here is that you can say, yeah, look, I mean, fuel races is not really an interesting thing. You don't see different strategies, this, that, and the other. However, what it does create is we're actually going to see the winner of the race on overall speed, because fuel's not going to come into the equation. There's going to be no question about it whatsoever. So, you know, we actually get to see these guys go as hard, as fast as they can, for as long as they can, and that's going to decide who wins the race.
Now, DeGroot came down pit road 1 lap sooner than Maleska did. We saw when everything settled out that he actually gained ground on the 91. On this upcoming final pit stop for these drivers, does Maleska kind of learn from that and he tries coming to pit road a lap or 2 sooner than DeGroot does to try and gain even more position? Because he's slowly starting to reel him again here the longer this run goes on.
Well, you've also got to remember that the pit window for these guys, Maleska come in the lap later, so he can run that extra lap longer. Additionally, he won't have to add an extra lap worth of fuel, whereas Nick DeGroot will. So that gap's going to close, I think, this time through pit lane. I'm wondering whether or not Nick DeGroot didn't necessarily run the tank dry, which is why he may have had a lap or 2 left in the tank. And that's why he came to pit lane early, was to open up this gap. But he's going to have to pay that back at the end of this pit stop, because he was trying to break that toe to Robert Maleska. He was trying to get out there and just punch this massive gap. And unfortunately, traffic played its part, as it always does, you know, within racing like this. And unfortunately, guys have come back to him and really forced him back into Maleska. So I wonder whether or not Maleska is going to be the winner at this time through pit road, just through sheer not having to add as much fuel.
Well, if you look at the time spent on pit road from commitment line to commitment line and pit stop in between, it was actually Robert Maleska III with the faster time, about 0.6 of a second faster overall than Nick DeGroot, but we didn't see that translate into any time gained on the racetrack when everything cycled around. So the only thing I can possibly think of that would have played a factor into the gap growing was maybe DeGroot being a little bit more aggressive either on pit entry coming to that commitment line or his pit exit coming back onto the racetrack.
I mean, you know, it could be in all of that. It could be where he cycled back into traffic, you know. The fact that Nick DeGroot cycled back out and had a clean track could have played a part. And admittedly, Robert Maleska may not have necessarily... I reckon he's probably lost it on that extra lap that he did, rather than necessarily being to do with between commitment line and commitment line, because you've got to realize that for the first lap of the race, he had nobody in front of him, you know, so he had to make adjustments, and he had to drive the car as hard and as fast as he could, but he was searching for the limit the whole way around the lap because he wasn't aware of where the limit was, and I think he lost a little bit of momentum there, whereas Nick DeGroot was already aware of what that limit was.
Looking ahead here from race leader Nick DeGroot, there's more traffic to deal with. Il Brooks in the 71, Matthew Rodriguez in the 57, and the problem right now for DeGroot is those two are actually battling up ahead of him, so there's no clear lane to be able to find any clear air to get to the nose. Yeah,
he's trying his hardest though. Admittedly, the draft is going to help. These guys have actually single-filed out to try and help him, so really good driving by the drivers at the tail end of the lead lap as well. You know, you've got to be able to have the thing about racing is you want to be able to maintain your own battle for position, but at the same time you want to be able to give the leader their option to come on by you because they've got their race to run, you know. So look, what these guys are actually doing is perfect. I mean, Matt Rodriguez gained a little bit in terms of when Nick DeGroot went by Gale Brooks, then he lost a little bit of time back to Gale Brooks when Nick DeGroot came by him, and the same's going to happen here with Robert Maleska.
Maleska's going to get by Rodriguez. Now has to get by the 71 of Brooks and then set his sights back on Nick DeGroot. When DeGroot was having to deal with these cars, Maleska closed it up to half a second. Now that he's having to deal with the traffic, it's starting to open up again. Now 7/10 and continuing to increase. DeGroot starting to pull away once again with the top spot. Guy that's on an island all his own is Bronson Stafford. He does have someone to race with. That is the lap machine of Jim Brooks in the 51 to his outside. But Bronson currently sits about 4.5 seconds behind second place Robert Maleska III and over 2.5 seconds back to Polo Hernandez. So right now he's just kind of, running his own race, which may not necessarily be a bad thing because the less drivers you got around you that you're racing with, the more room you've got on the racetrack, the more grooves you've got available to you, and at the same time, it helps keep your car in one piece.
Yeah, it does. And the issue for Bronson Stafford right now is he's got the two drivers that have had to cycle through pit lane on alternative strategies right around him. So he's got Jim Brooks, and probably about 5-6 laps ago, Jim Hendrick actually come on by him. Sorry, Jim. Jim Herrick. So I can't read at the moment. There's the coloring on my lettering is all over the place. Something's going on my PC. But anyway, so these guys got fresher tires. They're pushing a little bit harder. So he's had to let these guys by. The leaders haven't had this, which is why that gap's opened up a little bit. He's still going to keep managing, though. And the issue for him right now is that Jim Brooks is right there. And Jim's not running away because Jim actually only pit like a couple laps later than everybody else to pick up that fast repair. So he hasn't got this massive tire advantage, this massive fuel advantage over everyone else. Admittedly, right now, Jim's probably good to push on fuel and still make it home, no questions asked. So look, he's got the option to run as hard and as fast as he can, whereas Bronson doesn't really have that option. If he's a little bit fuel limited, then he's going to save. But the issue is, Jim Brooks is really just pushing him back slowly over a period of time into the guys behind him, and Paulo Hernandez is coming.
Hernandez has kind of left this group. Rick Ravon, Charles Teed, and Henry Bennett. Those three continue to battle for the 5th position. And we saw just moments ago a pass for 9th. Jimmy Drynan getting around Mike Teller. Good run there for Jimmy Drynan. Second start on the season. Last week had a good qualifying effort at New Hampshire, but then spent a good portion of the beginning of the race, kind of a moving chicane for other drivers. Finished that event out in the 17th position, doing a lot better here tonight as we got a driver on pit lane. This is a little bit sooner than we were expecting to see drivers hit pit road. That's Joe Agee in the 81, and it looks like that could have Yeah, that was unscheduled, and he's out.
That's very odd for Joe Agee. I actually wonder if something hasn't happened in real life and he's had to remove himself from the race for an unscheduled reason, because that car doesn't seem like there's no damage on that car whatsoever.
He's running on the lead lap around the 13th position when he brought it down pit road. So first retiree out of the event. He'll finish 22nd here tonight. As talking about that final pit stop for these drivers, it's coming up soon. It'll be somewhere in the next 5 to 7 laps when we see these drivers on pit road for probably the final time here this evening.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different stuff going on right now. So, like I said, you got Bronson Stafford and Jim Brooks. Their race is, playing out in completely utterly different manners, and they're just locked together on the racing track. And there's not much that they can really do to separate themselves because they're very similar paced at this point in time. So Bronson Stafford's just sort of using him as an air ram basically to push his way through the air. So that's working in his favor. All of a sudden that gap's opened up just a touch to Paulo Hernandez and behind him. There's different races and different stories are playing themselves out right around the racing surface as it stands at this point in time. And the best part about that is, if you keep your eyes on, Rick Ravon is starting to really try and chase down Paulo Hernandez, and that group seems to have single-filed out right now. So that's going to close up on towards the leaders over the next couple laps, and I think Bronson Stafford might actually be at risk here.
Right now, Nick DeGroot, 0.7 of a second back to Robert Maleska III. And you alluded to it, the battle was won, well, I should say one of the battles was won by Nick DeGroot on the first round of green flag pit stops. We'll see if Maleska can counter it and win the battle on this second round. It's looking like it's going to be a 2-horse race here between Maleska III and Nick DeGroot, two former champions. DeGroot, of course, the champion back in Season 2. Maleska, the outgoing champion back in Season 3, as Henry Bennett has hit pit lane from around, I think it was the 6th position. So first of the leader to hit pit road. The cycle has begun. Final pit stop of the night.
So this is Henry Bennett going, I need fresh air. I think I can beat these guys, but I need to create an overlap. He's coming to pit road early because he knows that fuel's not really a concern. He just wants to get that different track position, see if he can create an advantage. Ultimately, nothing may happen out of this. He may lose time, depending upon where he rejoins the circuit at and what traffic he's going to play himself into.
So they're out of turn 4. That was Benjamin Combs in the 77 who ducked onto pit lane. Benjamin was running around the 14th position, I do believe, when he ducked onto pit lane. Here comes Matt Wagner, who actually was one of the drivers that stayed out the longest during the first round. He's one of the early drivers to pit road here on the second round of pit stops. And the leaders
and Maleska are coming together. That is really interesting. So there's going to be no overlap on either of these guys.
Maleska closed up there? It was, what,
Yeah.
half a second, and now it's about a car length between the two coming onto pit road as number of drivers smoking the tires back there getting onto pit lane. Moskowitz, Drynen, and Telly are amongst those.
Yeah, and have a look at this. Nick DeGroot is going to accelerate out of his pick pay here, and then he's going to get up to pit lane speed, and then he's going to rejoin the track. Whereas Robert Maleska is going to put the pedal down, and he isn't even going to get to full speed before he crosses that pit lane line.
Look at that.
That is completely and utterly based on where their pit stalls are.
That right there could be an exchange for the lead, as it was Maleska the third getting off pit road ahead of Nick DeGroot. Stafford now from the lead going to hit pit lane. And I think that two things played the factor into that lead change there. Number one, as we saw, the gap was closed up on pit entry between those two drivers.
Go back and watch Nick DeGroot and Robert Maleska in traffic through 3 and 4 on that last lap. You have to, that's a replay that we need to see.
Drop back and take a look at that here, but we saw obviously as well Maleska starting on the pole position here. Obviously he had that first pit stall, and I think that helped him with his launch on pit exit. This is what Scott was just alluding to down here into turn 3. That's Rick Ravon in the 2 in the middle of this. Oh my goodness, muscling his way through. 4 wide for a brief moment there out of 4.
Yeah, and that's just, look at everybody's trying to fight for their track position, trying to make sure that they can get to pit lane, and Maleska just loses all his momentum because he's got to make adjustments, and DeGroot maneuvers that car absolutely perfectly. There was not another inch that he had in terms of pace.
I think that was the 0-1 of Polo Hernandez that was trying to come to pit road that slowed up Maleska, and this is your battle for the lead right now between DeGroot and Maleska, side by side down the backstretch, nose to tail out of 3 and 4. Maleska trying to side draft as much as he can around the outside, and as they continue to battle for this position, they've got 5 seconds, almost 6 seconds back to Bronson. Stafford DeGroot gets tight through the center of the corner, almost rides Maleska up to the wall.
Yeah, Maleska's got that momentum on the high sides. Anytime they come onto a straight section of the track, when you're running that high side, it's a longer way around the track, but what it means is that you can hang on to your momentum. You don't have to wash off as much speed because the corner's not as sharp, and the banking's a little bit better. The banking really works for you up there.
We saw Polo Hernandez have some difficulty getting onto pit road, almost got run over by Robert Maleska III. Unfortunately, the speeding police handing out their first ticket of the night. Polo Hernandez hit with a speeding penalty, down to the 20th position after running a majority of this race up inside of the top 7.
Wow, I mean, that's just crippled his race, and we're talking about luck. You know, if you have a look at the situation and where they were on the circuit, they had the leaders right around them. They had to make adjustments. Everyone was running slightly differently in that groove there because of the race scenario that they were in. People were trying to get to pit road. People were trying to let the leaders by. It didn't work. And ultimately, everyone's still in the race, which says that is phenomenal car control, phenomenal awareness. Charles Teed had to bail on his pit lane entry because otherwise he would have taken out Maleska.
And subsequently, he was one of the last drivers onto pit road here in the second and final cycle of green flag pit stops. Teed's going to currently be in the 8th position, just ahead of Matt Wagner. Mike Tellier's popped up into the top 10 as well. Got some traffic up here ahead of the 2 race leaders. I believe that is the 51 again of Jim Brooks, who actually just got himself back onto the lead lap with all of this cycling around. He's about 3-4 laps away from having to hit pit lane, and he's going to lose the lap under green flag conditions before even coming to pit road. Maleska is going to make pretty quick work of him and actually open up his gap to Nick DeGroot. DeGroot started out the season back-to-back 7th place finishes at Michigan and Road America. Best finish of the season last week at New Hampshire with 5th, and trying to better that here tonight with a victory. Of course, mentioned as well, had the momentum of that Indy 500 special event win a couple of days ago, Monday night here under the Dark Horse banner, but he wants his first victory since I believe it was, I want to say it was Homestead, Miami. I got to double check on that, last season in season 3 of the Dark Horse Racing Series.
So there's a lot more at stake for Nick DeGroot right here than there is for Robert Maleska. Maleska, if he finishes second, he'll maintain the lead and he'll extend it a little bit. He wants the win just so he can put a little bit more a buffer to his competition. Oh, yellow! Yellow, that changes the race
Jimmy Drynan,
scenario.
I believe. 99, I think, has had an issue. He sits on pit road, front wing completely gone. Oh, was having such a great run here tonight as well. Spent a good portion of this race up inside of the top 10, and just like that, closing in on 25 laps to go, the yellow flag waves for the first time here tonight, Chicagoland.
Oh, that's rough. That is extremely rough. Oh, man. You did not want to see that.
Take a look at what happened to him. He's battling with Dylan Moskowitz at the time. This was around the 13th position off of turn 4. Car gets a big run to the outside. Oh, and then Moskowitz just didn't really judge where the wall was, bounced off the wall and into the right rear quarter panel of Jimmy Drynan. Then Drynan, wild ride there as he pretty much Tony Hawk'd the catch fence into turn 1.
I mean, what Dylan said on the radio was that he didn't have enough room to get through there. And if you actually have a look at the shape of the wall there, he didn't. He really, really didn't. I mean, he was never really going to be able to get through there, you know, so that one's actually on Jimmy. Jimmy needed to create a little bit more space to make sure that they could both get in there into turn 1.
And not only did Drynan go up and ride the catch fence, but Dylan Moskowitz actually ended up riding the outside wall almost all the way into turn 2, maybe almost to the exit of turn 2, as we'll take a look at his wild ride here. 99 goes up into the air, 4 riding the safer barrier, comes back down onto the racing surface, and ooh, who's that? Nicholas Winnick. Whoa! That Charles Johnson, I think, in the 9 that almost actually might have hit the 4 car. If he didn't, it was the word that you coined, the gap whack, coming into play there that saved his chances of not having to use a faster pair. Right on board here with Charles Johnson. The 4 of Dylan Moskowitz and the 99 of Jimmy Drynan have already wrecked at this point. There's Moskowitz and, oh, nope, there was contact. You can see that the left front wing on the 9 machine is crumpled, and so, yep, he actually did make contact with the front end of the 4, so a 3-car incident if you also add in Johnson's machine, bringing out this first caution of the night.
That's yeah, look, I mean, that's disappointing. That's unfortunate. So, oh well, such is life, unfortunately. You just gotta deal with it.
We got some strategy here, Scott. Bronson Stafford, Charles Teed, Mike Tellier, all gaining track position here as they elect to stay out under this caution. Maleska III, DeGroot, Bennett, Ravon, Wagner, they all came to pit road, and for the second time tonight, that number 1 pit stall pays dividends for Maleska III because he got out ahead of DeGroot. He'll be restarting 4th, DeGroot back in 5th place here for this upcoming restart here this evening with, well, little more than 20 to go, I think, when we end up getting the green flag back in the air.
We'll keep our eyes on things as it stands, but anyway, look, I mean, hang on, we'll just get a sec, because I think we're looking at wave rounds at this point in time, so that's what we're trying to organize and arrange as it stands. So I just want to see where this throws us. So we're going to actually have, I think, 97 to go.
Gail Brooks went around and got a wave around there. I believe Gail Brooks actually was the free pass car here under this yellow. That other car there on the top side, I believe, is the 33 of Nicholas Winook, who was trying to get one of his 2 laps back, but he's now dropping towards the rear. And I believe that this caution actually saved Jim Brooks in the 51, who, remember, was off sequence with everybody. He was on the lead lap, was still out there on the racetrack at the time that caution came out, so he will be on the lead lap here for this upcoming restart. Looks like a total of 14 drivers will be on the lead lap of 20 still running when we get the green.
Yeah, so they're just organizing wave rounds at this point in time. It sounds like Benjamin Coombs thought he had a wave around, which he did, but I think he took it already. So he thought he was getting another one, which would have put him 1 lap ahead of the field. But now that's all sorted. So
He has since dropped to the tail end of the field, and 23 to go is what it will be here as Bronson Stafford leads us back to the green flag. Mike Tellier taking a look for second place on Charles T. Then you got the fresh tires behind Nick DeGroot in the 89, Maleska in the 91.
I think Bronson Stafford might have played himself a masterstroke here. He didn't need to pit, but you got to remember, fuel is clear. They didn't have to pit. But it's down to Mike Tellier and Bronson Stafford to work together to keep everyone behind them here.
Ooh, look at Nick DeGroot trying to go to the outside of T. Now looks back to the inside. Again, has to keep in mind, you cannot go below that white line or else that ensues a penalty. So had to be very careful that he turned that car back up and did not go down anywhere near that white line. He slots into third now, trying to get around the two teammates, the 61 and the 97, who are side by side for the race leading to turn 3.
Yeah, I think this is planned from both Bronson Stafford and Mike Tellier. They're working together here. They want to block up both lanes, which means Nick DeGroot has got to send it 3 wide to try and find a way through. Oh, he makes contact!
Oh, and up into the air goes Stafford, as well as Mike Tellier and Nick DeGroot. They reckon further up. That's Polo Hernandez in the 0-1 going around out of turn 2. Big melee from the entrance of turn 1 to the exit of the second corner. DeGroot and Stafford visiting the catch fence. Lot of right side damage on Mike Tellier. Big time damage as well on the 0-1 of Polo Hernandez. I'm not certain who it was that tagged him, but there's got to be at least another driver that sustained some damage. We didn't quite see it in our camera shot there, and a lot of suspension damage there on Polo Hernandez. That right front isn't even touching the racing surface right now.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Oh my god, that takes out. I mean, Bronson Stafford has put in a lot of work this week to try and put his car in a position whereby he could win this race. Remember how close he was last week? You know, he had options there. He had, potential for himself to win the race, and he got caught up with Robert Maleska. This time it's Nick DeGroot. DeGroot was trying to be aggressive. He could see that both of the FRN cars are leading the pack. He wants to get by them because he needs to make sure that he gets control of at least one of the lanes. If he can get control of one of the lanes, he can make the pass. That's what he's trying to do, and unfortunately, it just all goes sideways.
Tried to shoot up the middle. Stafford was on the inside. Tellier was on the outside. We'll take a more farther out view of it here, and it's just kind of hard to tell. It almost looked like a little bit of gap whack there with the contact of Nick DeGroot's left front into the right rear of Bronson Stafford. Obviously got him loose going into the corner.
Yeah. Look, let's start gap whack trending again, please. So gap whack, for those of you who aren't, I'm so glad that you said it because it sounded natural too. There was no force on it. So the gap whack is what I'm calling netcode. Unfortunately, there's a bit of gap between the two cars and they make a whack. So that's why it's called gap whack.
And here's what happens to Polo Hernandez. Oh, Hernandez actually initiated the follow-up contact as he got into the back of Jim Herrick. Both of those drivers were running off the lead lap at the time, and both of them sustaining some pretty good damage as well. Obviously, a lot of that. Oh, that's right. Yeah, because Herrick had already used his faster pair. I think that we could kind of translate some of that into reactionary of what had happened ahead of them, but nonetheless, both drivers sustaining quite a bit of damage. And do we dare take an onboard with Bronson Stafford here going into turn 1?
Oh man, it's disappointing. It's heartbreaking. There's not much you can really do for Bronson Stafford. Him and Mike Tellier are working together absolutely perfectly to try and hold down both lanes. They create enough of a gap that Nick DeGroot thinks he can get the car there. That's what the issue is, right? There's nothing he can do in that. He's just a passenger. What you've got to do as a race car driver is you've got to prevent there from being that sort of a gap so that the guy behind you knows that it's not a slot for you to go into. And unfortunately, him and Mike Tellier just didn't work close enough together to close down that gap. And that's what happens. Nick DeGroot saw a gap, he went for it, he tried it, and unfortunately some gap whack got in the way.
Yeah, we ended up running about 90 laps, green flag. Had that caution come out, everybody gets bunched back up, and everybody wants to take advantage of the fact that they're all back in the same zip code. And unfortunately, it's involved a couple of really big-name drivers here tonight. Nick DeGroot led the a good portion of this race. I think he's led the most laps up to this point. He had to use a faster pair, is going to be coming back out onto the racetrack 2 laps down. Bronson Stafford pretty much solidified himself in the 3rd position the majority of this race, and he is now back onto the track, but he is also 2 laps down to the race leaders. So all of a sudden, 2 of the possible favorites here in the final stages of this race find themselves pretty much out of contention. It now pops up some new faces. We've still got Maleska up here, but Charles Teed is now the new race leader. Henry Bennett's now up to 3rd. Rick Ravon there in 4th, and Matt Wagner slowly, methodically has now worked his way at the end of the night up into the top 5.
Yeah, what a performance from Matt Wagner. We said, look, I mean, the guy has had space. He's been incredibly unlucky, and that's racing, unfortunately. He's had to deal with that up until now. This time, the luck plays into his favor. Can he go for a win here? I'm not necessarily sure that he has the pace right now, but then again, I don't think we've seen him running as hard and as fast as he can so far tonight. If he can turn that wicker up, if he can find a few more miles an hour for you Americans, maybe he can.
You mentioned about Jim Herrick. That damage taking him out of the race. He has made the left-hand turn to the garage area, so he will join Jimmy Drynan, and Joe Agee will not be finishing out tonight's event here at Chicagoland. We're going to have 12 drivers on the lead lap. When we go back green, I believe Dylan Moskowitz was actually the recipient of the free pass under this yellow flag. Charles Johnson, Matthew Rodriguez, they are both 1 lap down in 13th and 14th, and then 2 laps down are Nicholas Winook, Nick DeGroot, Bronson Stafford. They're back out on the racetrack. Polo Hernandez and Mike Tellier still sit on pit lane, getting damage repair done to their machines, and that's a tough break there for Mike Tellier, too. A guy that, for the most part, in the beginning of this race was running anywhere from 10th to 13th, but then popped up here into the top 10 near the end of this race, played the strategy game, stayed out when most of the other leaders came to pit road, restarted up in 3rd, and his night comes to a bitter end here as well, as we are going to be closing in on 15 laps to go here at Chicagoland, and Charles Teed, who's making his 3rd start on the season, is leading us back into turn 1.
Yeah, let's see if Charles can really... This is a really good opportunity for Charles to see if he can win a race. He's got control of the field. That means he's punching the hole in the air. Whether or not that means that Robert Maleska is going to be able to make the move, though, let's find out. I'd love to see Charles to take this one away, though.
Here's Henry Bennett to the inside of Maleska for 2nd. Rick Ravon is going to jump to the top, make it 3 wide for the runner-up spot. Almost looking 4 wide on the front straightaway for the race lead. Why not?
And I tell you what, it looks like everyone's ganging up on Robert Maleska. They don't want to see him win another race.
I'll tell you what, man, when you're a 10-time winner last season and win the championship, you got to expect you're coming into the following year with a target on your back, as we almost had some contact there with Ravon and Teed for 2nd place. Bennett's going to clear for the top spot.
Yeah, and have a look at this from Rick Ravon. What a performance. He hasn't really shown a whole bunch of speed so far tonight, but remember what I said. Get yourself to that final quarter. Get yourself in there. Give yourself an opportunity. Rick Ravon has done that and done that extremely well, and now he's got pace.
And look at some of these other guys in the latter portion of this lead pack. Jeff Heisong running in 6th. Eric Peterson get a piece of the wall there off of 4, but he's currently holding down 7th, trying to keep Covey Moore in his rearview mirror.
Yeah, and all of a sudden that field kind of condenses. We lost a lot of drivers in that last wreck. A lot of phenomenal drivers have had to come down, grab a fast repair, see what they can do. Now look at Maleska. This is how you know this guy is a champion. He got shuffled back to 6th, kept his cool. He's back in 2nd, and I tell you what, Henry Bennett has got to keep his eyes in that rear view.
And we saw earlier the battle between Maleska and DeGroot. Obviously, Maleska knows that there is speed to be had on that top side. If you pinch down and side draft the car on driver's left, he might try and do that here with Henry Bennett, as they're dead even going into 3.
See if he can get it done. This is so close. This is going to be a phenomenal run to the end.
High side for Maleska, low side for Bennett, pays dividends. He leads that lap. 11 to go here at Chicagoland. Rick Ravon riding in 3rd, waiting to see which line's going to move. Matt Wagner just got around Charles Teed. Move him up to 4th. Side drafting down the back straightaway. Here comes Maleska once again. We got some smoke on the back straightaway. There is no caution for whatever that was from. Might have had something to do with the 57 of Matthew Rodriguez, who appears to be off the pace, but still no caution.
No, everything remains green, and I mean, we've got, 10 laps to go now? We're into the final stages, Seth. I mean, Maleska's fighting pace on that higher side. I mean, we've lost Mike Tellier due to, it looks like, an internet connection issue. So he's now going back to the garage area. Look, the race has just all of a sudden gotten spicy.
Right now, you've got 4 drivers up in this lead group, 2 of which are looking for their first win on the season. Rick Ravon and Matt Wagner. Bennett's looking for his second, and Maleska's looking for his third win in the first 4 races. All 4 of them nose to tail, separated by about half a second down the back straightaway.
Oh, all of a sudden, I mean, this race, who can tell? Do you want to lead it coming? Is this like Indy? You don't want to lead it coming to the final lap? I don't think so. I think you actually want to be the lead car in this pack. I think you want to control the aero because I think it's so much more difficult passing. Robert Maleska's been able to do it. I haven't seen a whole host of other drivers be able to do it reliably. They've had issues with being able to pass.
And not only that, but if you're Maleska out in front, you get to dictate the line you want to run, force the others behind you to change up the line they're running in search of clean air.
Yeah, 100%. That you cannot understate that. You cannot understate how badly you need to search for that clean air. You need it. You need the front wing air. You need to be able to really turn the car through the corners and maintain as much momentum. If you have to roll out of the throttle, that's a big problem. You're going to be losing time to the cars around you.
You're seeing right there, it's pretty much, you can see visibly 4 lanes in the corner separated by those seams. Maleska keeps running on the lowest lane. Right now, lane 2 looks like where Henry Bennett's going to run. Rick Ravon a couple laps ago was up as high as lane 3, almost touching lane 4. So they're all trying to find that clean air to the nose, try and get that corner exit as Maleska, about 3 car lengths in hand over Bennett, another 2 back to Ravon, and then 4 car lengths back to Matt Wagner. It's going to come down between these 4 if we continue under the green flag, as it's quite a ways back to the 5th place battle, Charles Teed and Jeff Hysong.
Yeah, it is really a 4-horse race, and I tell you what, Henry Bennett is really starting to lose this one towards Rick Ravon. Matt Wagner, what did I say about him earlier in the night? He was having a horrid night in terms of qualifying. He had to really pace himself to get through the early stages. Could he come out of this with a podium after a poor qualifying and a poor first couple stages of the race?
And Matt Wagner last week was really bad for him as he finished 18th in New Hampshire. He had a 9th place start in the season and also a 5th place finish. But last week really dropped him in the point standings. It would be a huge run for him here tonight if he were able to finish up here, at least in the top 5, if not on the podium position. And something I noticed just a moment ago that's starting to play a factor here as well in terms of these guys trying to get by Robert Maleska III is that right front is starting to heat up. Rick Ravon drove it deep through the center of 1 and 2, trying to get to the back bumper of Henry Bennett and almost met the outside wall for his troubles.
Oh man, tough night. You know, look, I mean, you got to deal with that aero push. The cars are so closely. That's the one thing about a caution is it closes the field down. It's been so long since the field has been this close together. But look at Maleska. All of a sudden, he's just running away with this race. 2 laps to go.
2 laps to go. The gap half a
Look at
second
Ravon.
back to a battle for 2nd place. Ravon again back to the throttle sooner, but it got tight on corner exit, so Bennett starts to open the gap down the back straightaway. White flag going to be displayed this time. What a start to the year for the defending champion. 1.5 miles away from his 3rd win of the season and only the 4th race on the schedule.
Yeah, and remember, he got shuffled back to 6th in the early runnings of this last green flag zone, so that's a phenomenal effort to get through all those cars. Ravon! Here comes Ravon!
Little contact there between those 2 for 2nd place, but this is going to be the fun battle to watch. Back to the checkered flag, taking place half a second, a full second, behind your race winner, Robert Maleska III. Give it to Bennett, I do believe, on the top side by less than a wing.
Oh, that's a shame. I mean, Ravon got a phenomenal run. I think he got a little bit close to the car ahead of him. Matt Wagner's going to pick up himself a 4th. Rick Ravon would have finished in 3rd position. Covey Moore comes away with 7th. Jeff Hysong 5th. I mean, what is amazing about this field is that you throw your hand out and any of those guys can win that race after that last caution.
Robert Maleska III, so far this season at Speedways, he's perfect. 3 for 3, Michigan, New Hampshire last week, and Chicagoland here tonight. 75% winning streak for him in these first 4 races, and tell you what, last season he went to victory lane a total of 10 times. With a start like this, he might beat that record here this season.
Wouldn't that be something if he was able to go, back to back and win championships, but just break another record? I mean, the field has definitely stepped up this season. I feel the pace is phenomenal, the efforts are phenomenal. But for him to come out here and show his class, he's gotten a little bit lucky, and sometimes you need that to be a champion.
Well, he's going to obviously get to celebrate in Victory Lane for the third time here this season. However, the job's not done. The pressure is not off because, yes, Bronson Stafford, who was his closest competitor in the points, did not have the night he was looking for, finishing in the 17th position. But Henry Bennett, who is only 11 points back, finishes just behind him in second. Rick Ravon, who is fourth in the points, 19 points back, finishes on the podium as well in third place. So the competition's still there. The pressure's still on heading into the Bluegrass State of Kentucky next week.
Yeah, I mean, Kentucky's a phenomenal circuit for racing for IndyCars as well, so that's going to be a phenomenal race again next week. I love this series, man. Look at the racing, look at the quality, look at the difficulties a lot of these drivers ran into tonight. This was not an easy race by any stretch of the imagination. Fuel was taken out of the equation. All of a sudden, you just had to run it as clean as you possibly could and as fast as you possibly could, and a lot of these drivers had difficulties with that. I had Nick DeGroot had that race over Maleska. Hands down. I think he had him covered. I don't think Maleska could have beaten him in pure speed. And then the cautions, they just changed everything. And DeGroot, he sends an aggressive move because he's got Robert Maleska breathing down his neck. Why would you send that move? Because you've got Robert Maleska breathing down your neck. When you've got a multiple race winner and series champion right there, and you want to prove something, it makes you change your driving behavior. It makes you become more aggressive. He sends it, and ultimately it takes 3 cars out of the equation. That's disappointing. But at the same time, you got to look at things from Nick DeGroot. He was trying to be aggressive. He was behind a team of 2 cars that were working together to control both lanes. He sent it. He had to send it to make the move work. It didn't work, and it's unfortunate. But I applaud him for having a crack.
Obviously, this early on in the season, with the points as close as they are, there are going to be quite a number of drivers that are going to find some negative numbers beside their names heading into next week, dropping in the standings. Bronson Stafford, Paula Hernandez, and also Nick DeGroot with the poor performances that they had here tonight. A combination of those cautions as well as pit road for some coming into play in this as well. But on the flip side, a lot of drivers that we really didn't talk about here tonight up towards the front of the field getting solid outings. We talked about the top 3. Wagner up there in 4th. Jeff Heisong, I think we only talked about him maybe, in the final 10 laps. He brings it home with a top 5 and 5th. Charles Teed, he ended up playing the strategy that gained him track position. He maintained it for 6th place. Kobe Moore in 7th. Gale Brooks got the lucky dog, got the free pass under, I think it was the second caution, was able to move his way up to 8th. Dylan Moskowitz and Benjamin Combs going to complete out the top 10.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal performance from Dylan Moskowitz. I mean, he had an interesting night. It was a little bit up, a little bit down. He was racing Jimmy Drynan for most of the night. It was quite aggressive from Jimmy Drynan. Race Control have actually, the admins have said that they're going to have a look at that from Jimmy. They're really going to dive deep into it and just sort of see, who's at fault, what they need to do to sort of improve the racing, and what's the best thing for the league as well. I think you've got to look at the last 2 weeks from Jimmy. If you have a look at New Hampshire, he was self-spinning a lot, and he was causing a lot of issues last week. You've got to say, from Jimmy's standpoint, yeah, you can come along 1 week and have a look at that and be like, okay, yeah, look, that's a throwaway week. I made some mistakes. I pushed a little bit too hard. The next week, you've really got to come out and you've got to make sure that you're clean. You've got to make sure that you're consistent. You've got to make sure that you show the league admins, yeah, I do belong here, and I should be here on driver skill alone. Not that everyone has to sit down and watch over me at the end of the race to make sure that I'm not causing issues out in the circuit. Has he done that this evening? I was hearing drivers talking to each other, basically saying that he was being very aggressive the whole race long, and he was getting quite close to cars, squeezing them for room. So the guy's definitely an aggressive racer. That's fine if he's not causing issues. Unfortunately for Jimmy, he is starting to cause issues, so he needs to have a look at himself and look at the way that he's driving. I'm not necessarily saying take away the aggressiveness. What I'm saying is that he just needs to curb the edges of it, really, and make sure that he's providing enough racing room, because you take away that first caution that Jimmy and Dylan Moskowitz brought out, and the race runs green to the end because this field is so spread out, it's going to be so difficult to cause a yellow.
And obviously, we're early on in the season, but a lot of times you can actually go back and look at results from race 2, race 3, race 4, and then later on in the schedule, notice a close up of points or a growing of points and point back to an earlier race. These races, yes, they're being run to set up for the championship later on in the season, but they actually do have a lot of bearing on what the championship picture looks like further on down the road. And the last thing you want to do is be overly aggressive and be that factor, so to speak, into pretty much maybe predetermining who the champion's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily predetermining who the champion's going to be. I mean, look, if you have a look, why is Robert Maliska leading right now? Yeah, he's made a mistake. You can definitely say that his race at Road America was all his own fault, but he adapted to that, right? I'm curious to see the next time that we go to a road course what his approach is. Is he just going to sit there and take points? Is he going to be aggressive? Because right now his season is running along as about as good as it can be going, especially when you consider that he's had effectively a drop week come from Road America. So it's been difficult for him. He's shown on the ovals that he is definitely the class of the field, and he's the guy that everyone is trying to hunt down. Road courses, he's right there, and his pace is definitely good enough to take some wins, but at the same time, the risk versus the reward, in that instance, I think the next time that we see him out there, and this is the difference that a champion will make within their driving style, is the next time that we see him on a road course, he's going to back it down a couple extra tenths. And the reason he's going to do that is a third place to him on a road course is as good as a win, because it keeps him moving ahead of some of his other rivals. It keeps him within spitting distance of the remainder of them. He's only losing a couple of points to the guys that are winning the race. So that's what his goals will be for the remainder of the season. Wins are great, but making sure that you points consistently finish for the remainder of the season, that's his goal.
And talking about that upcoming road course, that's going to be in 2 weeks' time on July 21st at Watkins Glen, just after Kentucky next week. Let's go down trackside, talk with some of our podium finishers. Let's kick things off with the driver that came into tonight's race, fourth in the point standings, your third place finisher, Rick Ravon. Hey, Rick, Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
What's going on? How you doing, Scott and Seth?
Doing good. We were treated to a heck of a finish here tonight, but obviously with a lot of some contact, 3 wide, almost 4 wide racing there in those final stages, you were right in the thick of it. How nerve-wracking is it for a driver with, there is space here, but when you got them 3 abreast, it's very limited. So were you sweating it there, especially being on the top side of the 3 wide on several occasions?
Not really. I mean, with this group here in Dark Horse, you could trust them side by side by side by side by side by side. So I really wasn't worried about it, just as long as you hold your line, you could be sure that the guys underneath you were going to hold their line. So I really wasn't too worried about that.
I mean, it was a difficult race tonight. Ultimately, it settled down into basically a green flag run, and then cautions come thick and fast towards the end. How does that alter your behavior as a driver? We saw you didn't get the qualifying that you wanted. You were basically just in trying to move your way through the field slowly, and then all of a sudden cautions come out. Do you get more aggressive because of that?
Well, the time to get aggressive was on the starts and the restarts because the tires were still fresh, and that's when you can make moves. Once the tires start to wear, it gets more and more difficult. As you saw, the field spread out quite a bit, and it was just really hard to get a run on somebody because once you got to the corner, all you have to do is move in front of you, take your air away. And you were done. You had to back out of it, and then you lost, a couple of tenths. You had to try to work your way back up. So it was very difficult. Last week got the pole and was leading and came in the pits, and then the yellow came out. We got caught behind the pace car, and that actually happened twice. I pit while leading, and yellow came out, and then there was an accident in front of me I got involved in, and it was just a very frustrating week. And now this week I had a bad qualifying. That was my own fault. I messed it up. But you know what? To be able to come up here and get a third place, I almost got second. We almost got the guy that I call Handsome Henry. I saw his picture. This guy should be a model, man. He should be in magazines. But I almost got Henry there for second place. It was really close there at the line. But I'm just loving this league. A Dark Horse is amazing. These guys are incredible. I love racing here, and I look forward to it every week. This is great.
Talk about next week. I mean, obviously here tonight, first 1.5 mile track that you guys took to on the schedule. We go to another 1.5 mile next week at Kentucky. Obviously with the good run here tonight, what's the outlook for the Bluegrass State?
Well, I guess with Maleska in the field and Bennett and a few of these other guys that are just top notch, just hoping for a top three. A podium is what you shoot for because it's just so difficult to get a top three. So if you get a top three in this league, you've really accomplished something. So I mean, we'll wait and see what happens as far as the setup is concerned. These guys at Dark Horse, man, they just give these they give us amazing setups, really competitive setups. You can't, mess with the roll bars or the weight jacker, so you have to just deal with what it is. But everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's got the exact same setup, so it's head to head. But as far as next week, I'm looking forward to it. That's a fun track, and I'm sure that we're going to put on just as good a show as we did this week, if not better.
Well, a great start to your season nonetheless there, Rick. So far, 4 top 10s, 3 top 5s in these first 4 races, and you carry that momentum into next week. Looking forward to seeing if maybe you can finally get this 2 machine in victory lane, but congratulations on another solid podium finish here tonight. We're going to give you the opportunity now for some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
Well, thanks to the guys that run this league, Charles Teed, thanks very much. You're awesome. And let's see, Eric Peterson, and I can't think of the others. I'm still too new. Thanks to you guys up in the booth. I can't wait to watch the race. I have some time now because it's 9:30. I'm going to actually watch it before I go to bed. Thanks to the drivers. You guys are awesome. I'm just having so much fun. This is the best league that I've ever been in. This is the challenge that I need, and I'm just loving every second of it. And hopefully next week we can put the Gould Charge in victory lane. That would be great.
Well, Rick Ravon brings home P3 here tonight at Chicagoland Speedway. Congratulations on a great run. Enjoy your week, and we'll see you back here, Kentucky next Wednesday night.
Yes, you most certainly will, unless the power goes out or something like that. God forbid. Thanks so much.
Hope that doesn't happen.
Thank you.
Rick Ravon finishing 3rd place here tonight in a photo finish, 8/1000ths of a second short of getting 2nd place, away from Henry Bennett. Look like we have Henry here available for an interview right at this point in time. So looks like we're actually going to go down to victory lane. 3rd time this season celebrating in victory lane is the defending champion, Robert Maleska III. Hey, Robert, Scott, and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yeah, I got you guys. How's it going?
Well, man, I'll tell you what. We have seen you win races this season in many different interesting fashions. Fuel strategy at Michigan, a last lap pass last week at New Hampshire, and here tonight, having to really battle with Nick DeGroot and then hold off a hard-charging Bennett and Ravon here in the closing stage of what was looking like almost a completely green flag race at Chicagoland. Obviously, coming into this season, you had to know there was a big target on your back, but it looks like you're making some big statement wins here, saying, hey, I'm looking for back-to-back championships, and you're doing it early on.
Yeah, firstly, thanks to Troy Lee Designs, HyperX, and Butt Kicker for sponsoring the series. But yeah, in my opinion, the race was kind of boring. I'm not sure how it was farther back, but, after 6 to 8 laps, the draft was just so bad, or the car would just plow so bad that you would get within like 5/10, and then you drop back, half a second, then you could kind of claw your way back. But I'm glad we got that caution actually with 30 to go and put on a pretty good show at the end.
I mean, Robert, we're talking about championship implications from here onwards. You made a mistake a couple weeks ago at Road America. We're talking about how you're potentially going to tackle Watkins Glen when it comes up in a few weeks' time. Do you want to talk us through your mindset? Are you going to maybe back it down a few extra tenths and just say, hey, I'm happy to accept a 3rd place? Or are you going to be pushing out as hard as you can and go for a win?
I'm always going probably 95%, close to 100%. So at Watkins, I'll be probably pushing as hard as possible. But I mean, we'll see how the race goes. I think last season it came down to fuel mileage. I think Alex Van der Sant made a really big save to win that race. So, if it's the same distance, if it's the same, mileage rating on a different setup, that might come into factor. But we'll see.
Now, Robert, obviously in these first 4 races, we've run tracks of different configurations, 2-mile, road course, 1 mile, and here tonight, 1.5 miles. We're actually going to be, for the first time this season, going to back-to-back mile-and-a-half tracks, Kentucky next week. One thing that we saw here tonight played a big part into you being able to gain track position was the fact you qualified on the pole, had that number 1 pit stall. We saw you be able to win the battle off pit road on the second cycle green flag pit stops over DeGroot, and then when you and most of the leaders came down after the first caution, number 1 pit stall gained you track position once again. Now, we don't really necessarily know how these cars are going to handle at Kentucky, but how much importance do you put on the good qualifying efforts to get that further up pit stall, especially on what we saw here tonight?
Yeah, today I think the first 2 stalls were huge because there's not much space to the line at all. Whereas I think Kentucky there's a pretty good gap to the commitment count. Excuse me. So I think qualifying is not going to be as big there. But yeah, I always pride myself on being able to hot lap as much as possible. Even though, in my opinion, this qualifying result today, I thought. For me, speed was really bad. I messed up quite a bit on entering 3 throughout the rest of the lap, so I was surprised to get pole. But yeah, just keep qualifying up front. Track position's always king. Seems like in all these races. So see if we can keep that up next week.
Just to give folks a bit of a foreshadow, next week at Kentucky, Maleska goes in the defending winner. He got the pole and won the race last season, one of 6 times that he did that last year. So obviously we're looking to see if he'll be able to double down in back-to-back seasons. We wish you luck in that. But Robert, another victory here tonight. Right now you are batting .750 in terms of winning percentage, 3 for 4 in the first 4 races on the schedule. Congrats on that. We're now going to turn the microphone over to you for some victory lane. Thank you, sponsors and shout-outs.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks to Jeff and Dylan for being my teammates. Great to see Jeff get a great result and Dylan have a nice comeback there at the end. And thanks to you guys for announcing on FRN.
Robert Maleska the third win on the year in a very young Season 4 of the Dark Horse Racing Series as he takes the checkered flag here in the Windy City at Chicagoland Speedway. Congratulations, Robert. Best of luck next week as you try and defend your win at Kentucky.
Yep, thanks, boys. Have a good one.
That's going to conclude our coverage here tonight from Chicagoland. And talk about a race taking a complete 180 there, Scott. We kind of had ourselves settled in for this thing to go green all the way to the end, figure out who had the best car on the long run in terms of overall speed, and then 2 cautions that took out some big players, completely flipping this race over, bringing some new faces up to the front. But one of the constants, Robert Maleska III, keeping himself at the front and finishing up at the front.
Yeah, and I mean, the big kicker for me is he got Meyer back in traffic there. He gets back to 6th place initially on the initial jump, and he's comfortable with that. He's comfortable making the moves. He's patient. There's a lot of traffic shuffling around the track right ahead of him, and he makes the moves. He makes them decisively. He keeps the momentum up, and he gives himself the shot at the win. Then he gets to the front, and nobody can catch him. There's guys that are close, but the tires just wear down just that little bit. They're not as sheeny. There's not a grip, and nobody else can make the move on him. So that's a perfectly planned race, and that's a man that's on top of his form right now.
As mentioned, next week we go to Kentucky. Maleska, the defending winner. However, last season when we ran here for Dark Horse, we were using the IR18 machines. This season we're in the DW12s. Does that difference in car play a factor into Maleska maybe having more competition that he's going to have to hold off next week?
I mean, potentially. I mean, guys are definitely going to come out and they're definitely going to want to try and take him down. They're going to want to hunt. They're not just going to be comfortable sort of attacking or defending, all of these sorts of things. It's going to be so difficult. It's not going to be as easy as you possibly think it will be. These guys are definitely going to have to work their butts off. That much is for sure, but we'll see if they can do it.
There's a number of guys that are racing here this season that did not take part in last year's Kentucky race. Maleska led 63 of the 120 laps 1 year ago. We'll look to see what he's going to be able to do when they head to Kentucky next week. But he gets his 3rd win on the season. He will carry the points lead into Kentucky next week. And we will be bringing you coverage of that next Wednesday night with the green flag flying at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But a wild one here tonight at Chicagoland Speedway. Some late race drama, late race restarts, some chaotic cautions with drivers reaching the catch fence levels over in 1 and 2. But at the end of the night, it's Robert Maleska III hoisting the trophy. Scott's been a great one here tonight in the Windy City. Appreciate you joining me in the booth.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, what a wonderful race. I'm so happy to be here once again.
Thanks to everyone that tuned in tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed our coverage here for the Dark Horse Racing Series presented by Troy Lee Designs. For Scott Rankin, I'm Seth Cole. We'll see you guys next week at Kentucky Speedway as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flat Out Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flat Out Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flat Out Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flat Out Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.